Horticulture Club's little seminar on September 16th. If somebody wants to come and help man a booth for our club, that would be awesome. That way we can maybe generate some more members and get our word out and stuff like that. And that'll be September the 16th. That's all I have.
Okay, great. We do need to, I need to be added to the bank account. I never wanted to be. We've had some, people who are signers on the account that have not been in good health, and we hadn't been able to get in touch with them. We need to reimburse other people for, the things that their expenses. So I'd like to vote for me to be added as signer on the bank account. So all members, all paying members, in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, good. We need to write that down in the minutes so I can take it to the bank and present it to the bank. That's the most important thing.
Donnie, did we vote to remove any people that are on the signature card currently?
No, I don't want to remove anybody.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done that in the past. We don't need to do it now. I've just got a couple of people MIAs. So.
Okay. Yeah, I know.
Lou, so we're doing Facebook Live tonight. We've had several people ask, can you do a Facebook Live so we can catch the meeting, so if you mind, don't walk in front of this camera, this phone over here. Are we live now, Lou?
Yes,
Okay,
should be.
Great, yeah. Now I'm really nervous.
We have one person watching.
Okay, good. That takes the heat off. Lou wants to. I asked Lou, would he come and talk a little bit about the man the beekeeper in Fort Worth who was trying to harvest honey. We don't have a lot of particulars. We haven't been given a lot of particulars, but I'll let Lou come and talk about that just for a minute.
So I think everybody's heard of the unfortunate incident in White Settlement. There was a beekeeper. Again, not too many details are out yet, and more people may know, but at least all the research I have done. Currently, there was a beekeeper in White Settlement. He was a vet. He was tending to his bees, told other people, neighbors, that he was going to harvest honey. At some point, there was a fire in the backyard when the firefighters were called. The beekeeper was at that time found deceased, and the beehives were on fire. They don't know what caused him or the beehives to catch fire. He didn't catch fire, it was just the beehives. He was just deceased. They did say when the firefighters arrived that the bees were aggressive. They had 3 firefighters that were taken to the hospital just on precautionary measures because they were stung quite a bit, but they will, no issues, they will recover. So the bees have been relocated, and the rest of the investigation is still taking place. So it's an unfortunate thing. I think the lesson learned from this is if you're tending to your bees, make sure somebody knows what you're doing and where you're at all times. Have your cell phone ready, and have somebody available to check on you once in a while.
I think the one point should be taken away is we are in July, and our temperatures are extremely, extremely hot out there. And when you're suited up, you get even hotter. And it's very easy for this heat to overtake you. And if you got any kind of underlying medical condition, you collapse due to heat stroke or heart attack or whatever. If you had somebody there to help watch you out while you're out there, it's very important. So, I work bees a lot alone, and this heat just is a killer. So you watch out for the heat this time of year.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has heard anything different or has any more information that they are willing to share about that incident. No?
Okay, thanks, Lou. Appreciate it. So, on the smoker thing, I have no idea what happened with the man. Do you know anything, James? I heard you talking before the meeting. But my wife said something that she had heard something about using a flammable substance to calm the bees. I don't have any clue about that. I honestly have not even heard the news story. I heard from my wife that this happened. But we just have to be careful, like James was talking about with underlying medical conditions, but also fire. You know, we live in an area that's always dry. I'm sure White Settlement is also dry, but here, you know, they had some mandates that you couldn't even weld, you know, pipe fence welders couldn't even weld at a certain time, you know, so I started carrying a fire extinguisher around. I've experimented with the liquid smoke that you cook with in the water and sprayed that on the hives, and I've had luck with that, you know, I don't do it a lot. But when it's extremely hot, you know, and I don't want to light a smoker when I'm afraid to set something on fire, then I try to come up with an alternative method. I had, you know, a member of the group tell me, you know, that it's so hot to work their bees. And I said, what time are you working your bees? And they said like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's the hottest part of the day. So, you know, I buy contraptions like fan jackets and ice vest and things like that. But honestly, you got to get in and get out as quick as possible. If you really don't have anything to do in that hive and it's a hot part of the day, it's best just to, you know, catch them in the morning, catch them the next day. I think I worked mine. I looked in some last night. It was 7:30. And that was because the sun had passed the tree line and I had some shade to work in. And I'd forgotten that I'd ordered some queens a couple of months ago and I had to get out there and do something. So, you know, when you have to do something, then you got to do what you got to do. But, yeah, and, you know, it's easy to say don't work the bees by yourself, but sometimes you are by yourself to work the bees. But you just got to keep an eye on your body. You know, they say if you get into heat stroke, then you're going to stop sweating. You'll start getting clammy. I've never had those sensations, but from people that I know that have had those, you know, it's a very serious situation for them. But I'm kind of you know, I'm not much for the heat anyway. If I can get out of it, then I'll stay out of it. Tammy, do you want to come and tell us what's not blooming?
Everything.
I asked her to do the what's blooming, and she goes, everything's dead.
Can you hook this up?
I cannot.
Oh.
You're asking the wrong guy. You should have asked that guy a while ago. We can, is it just a hookup kind of thing?
Let's see that.
Okay.
I have a friend that she's been able to retire from teaching, and she makes us all feel bad because she sends all these pictures of her hikes that she goes on. So she has like a 52 hike a year challenge, and so she goes on 52 hikes, and a lot of them are in the LBJ grasslands. And she's always sending me pictures of everything that's blooming, and she tries to catch bees in it, and she always says they're mine, and I say yes they are. And so she says your girls are busy.
Where do you plug in?
Right here. So nope, that won't work.
What about, is this different here? No, that's the big one. You got the big one?
Nope, I don't have a big one.
Okay.
So this is not gonna happen.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So anyway, so I'll just tell you what's blooming. She called it Rulella and the partridge pea, and she said the partridge pea was really good. The bees were all over it. So if you're thinking about planting, that might be a good one to plant. The prairie clover and the fleabane is that little white teeny tiny daisy you see out there that grows pretty big groups. She said that was also blooming. She said that there's a thing called scaly blaze star, and it's a real pretty little skinny plant with purple flowers on it. She said the bees were all over that one too. And then the mountain pink. She said they were on a bunch of stuff, but they were really on those two plants this weekend. Texas green eyes, which they look pretty sad in the picture that she sent, so they're about out of here. And then you have the western ironweed, and she said the western ironweed was another one that they were on, and it's a little purple flower. So it's kind of funny because a lot of the things that they were on were the little tiny flowers, but they were finding stuff on it. And then of course, I don't know if any of you still have the common sunflower still blooming. Mine are just about to start dying, but they really, really like the sunflowers. And then the soft gold aster was also blooming. The sleepy daisy and the Texas dandelion look the same. They're that single little yellow flower. They seem to kind of like those. And then she found a bush that she thought was really weird. It's called the gum malella, and they were on that one too. And that's all that she had out there. And I don't know if y'all have the broomweed with the little yellow flower that will take over your pasture if you're not careful. It should be starting to bloom here pretty soon. All right, next one.
Thank you, Tammy.
I saw some spotted bee balm going crazy on 51.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we still have bee balm too. The bee balm that I planted in my yard is still blooming. Still blooming. But that's not, this is stuff that she found out naturally.
So is that the same as horse mint, James?
It's
The
just
green?
a different member of the family. It's a very light color. When you're driving by, it looks white.
Yeah.
And when you get closer to it, you can kind of see a shade to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's what I see, and we have some of that blooming at my house. But how are your hives doing that were here? They're here. How are they doing?
I'm gonna pull some honey off of them tomorrow. I checked them 2 weeks ago. I was out of town this past weekend.
Yeah.
And I have at least a full super, possibly more. Some of them weren't 90% capped, so I just left them all there.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring a refractometer.
Yeah.
Refractometer out with me tomorrow.
Well, good deal.
At 9:30 a.m. I'm not going out any later.
Right, yeah. Well, James used to, James said one time, what time are you going to work the bees? And I'm like 10. And he said, God, I thought you'd be out there about 8 o'clock. And I go, oh, no, you're crazy. And now, yeah, I'll be out there about 8 o'clock. I like those later hours, but not happening. So, what else do we have? Does anybody else notice anything blooming?
There's still some mesquite blooming around.
Oh man, the mesquite went crazy, didn't it?
It just went nuts here. But it's still spotty in the area.
Yeah.
You'll see it in maybe one valley, it got nice fresh blooms on it, and another valley it's not.
Yeah.
But it went crazy the second bloom.
I went over to Hazlitt today and there was just trees covered in bloom that I've never seen bloom before. It was really crazy. But I didn't catch much of a mesquite bloom up in this area.
I haven't seen a single one.
Never. You have not this year?
Not this year.
Wow.
But there's not much indicator. I see it more.
Yeah.
Maybe there's spots I don't. Farther south where there's more water.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the rain has been weird here and there.
Yeah.
Yeah, what rain?
The bindweed. Did you mention bindweed?
Nope.
So there's little yellow flowers, not yellow, I'm sorry, white flowers. Sometimes they're pink, and they're all over the ground, and that makes honey too. So if you have some of that and you want to keep it, then it's good. But it is very invasive too. I think I brought some from Floyd Ada. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask a question?
No question.
I've been reading, I know that we're coming into a time when the snow on the prairie is going to be blooming, and I'm told that honey is awful. Is that true?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
really?
Well,
Keep the bees away from that plant?
So-
Good luck with that.
So it's a beautiful honey. You look at it and you think this is going to be wonderful, and then you taste it and it burns the back of your throat like you wouldn't believe. Now the cappings are pure white. James posted him getting some, I guess, mesquite,
That was mesquite.
and it was his honey his cappings were pure white. It was beautiful, and that's the way that snow on the prairie is. When you got that, it's a profuse nectar maker, but the bees it doesn't harm the bees in any way. It's probably very good for medicinal purposes, for burns, cuts, things like that.
Eat it.
Yeah, but eating it is, unless you just want something to burn your throat, you can't talk afterwards.
What plant are you talking about?
It's called Snow on the Prairie.
Called what?
Flower.
Snow on the Prairie.
Now, it hasn't started blooming yet,
Snow
has
on
it?
the prairie.
No,
It hasn't started yet.
no.
Usually end of August, 1st of September is when the snow on the prairie goes.
Yeah, it's usually a fall thing. most people wanna get their honey off before that happens.
Let them keep that honey.
Yes, it's good for
Yeah,
them.
strip them down and let them rebuild with snow
Sure.
prairie, goldenrod, broomweed.
There you go, yeah.
What's wrong with goldenrod?
They keep it-
Some people, don't like it because of the dirty sock smell.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of it myself. It's very pretty honey, and it doesn't burn or anything, but.
I've noticed it by itself is not that bad, but it just tends to be blending with other nasty flowers.
Yeah. I had got some from Minnesota. We had some bees up there. My wife's from Minnesota, and we had gotten some that honey, and I brought it back, and I was selling honey over in Coppell, and people were always like, "Well, all honey's good honey," and we know that's not true. If you harvest honey. This was my example of bad honey, and this one lady tasted it and she loved it, and I'm like, well, you can buy it. But everybody else hated it, and I had a girl tell me one time, I was at the stock show selling honey, and I asked a very young girl, like 14, 15, would you like to taste some honey? And she goes, why would I want to put anything in my mouth that tastes like a dirty sock? And I'm like, oh, well, I don't have any of that. Yeah, but she was used to that kind. She was from up north, and it's more of a prevalent plant nectar supplier up north than it is here. But we do have some here. Anything else?
What about that trumpet creeper?
So I have never seen a bee on them, but we've had a member that said in Fort Worth that he saw them all over the trumpet vine. So, and I even planted some and had some come up, but they're way up in the tree. No way I can see them. But have you seen?
Well, they're blowing all over the place, but I haven't really noticed if
Yeah.
there's bees on them.
A lot of times bees will go to things that we don't typically see them get on. If there's no nectar. But my bees at home they have fresh nectar, and there is horse mint, and there's a little mosquito around, things like that. But I was concerned about them. Thought maybe I need to feed them. When I looked at them the other night, they had fresh honey, so I was really surprised.
So we are seeing them still come in with pollen on their legs.
Yeah.
But we did start feeding because everything I read said the nectar flow should be coming to an end, and so we just started feeding.
Right. So, James, what do you think about the nectar flow coming to an end?
I think the nectar flow is still here. It's not as strong as it was, but to me, what I'm watching out more is a pollen dearth. I'm looking to see if they're bringing in pollen. And I keep a few pollen feeders out to see if they're bringing in or hitting my pollen feeders, because if they're not bringing in pollen, they're not raising young. But I think just the flow is slowed down dramatically in our area anyway.
Yeah. Anybody else?
So Donnie, first question
If they're not getting pollen, they're not raising brood?
They reduce the amount of brood they raise, that in correlation with the temperature that we have outside right now. When the hive gets above, 98 degrees, the queen starts ramping back on production, although I saw a lot of hives last weekend that had 7 and 8 frames of brood in them, and it was 107 degrees. So I don't know, I'm watching the pollen flow.
Okay.
What's that, Lou?
Facebook Live question, when should we harvest our honey then?
Well, I like to take it when we have it. But in this part, a lot of people don't harvest their honey until Labor Day because they're letting the bees eat the honey that they've made. Some of that honey is the best honey you're ever going to get. So I like to take it and then give them frames back, and if they make more honey, then that's great. If they don't, then you feed them. So it's going to be a, how full is your freezer kind of thing,
What's the moisture?
Right, yeah. The moisture content of the honey?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your moisture? Is it below 18%?
Mm-hmm.
Is 90% of your frame capped?
Right.
So,
and you throw it out when you turn it over. Is your super full? If it's full, take it. There's no sense in
They
waiting.
have to have something to survive winter. Don't they have to have something to survive winter? I mean, how do you determine that?
So James takes all his honey and he feeds the bees sugar syrup and candy boards. So some beekeepers do it that way. I prefer to leave some on. I like them to have the natural enzymes.
Yeah.
So, but the candy board is a fantastic insurance policy, and the bees typically come out of winter just booming. So I would definitely do a candy board if I was a small beekeeper.
I don't know what that is.
So you'll find out later. Okay? and of course, you know, you can go search on the internet for anything you might hear.
Okay.
So don't take our word for it. Okay? Anything else, real quick? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we just started feeding our bees, and we use a 2-to-1 concentration. Is there any downside to doing that in the summertime? Could that evaporate and set up in the feeder, or should I use using lighter syrup?
Is it 2 parts water or 2 parts sugar?
No, 2 parts sugar.
Oh no, that's no problem.
Okay, so it won't set up?
No, 2 parts sugar shouldn't set up.
All right.
I would go ahead and do 67% sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's make it complicated. Yeah.
Yeah, that's 2 parts sugar.
How fast are they eating?
Well, we just put it in a few days ago, so I haven't.
I put 3 gallons out today and it's already gone.
My goodness.
But you're open feeding?
Yeah, there was a YouTube video where they took a chicken feeder and put rocks in the tray so that it wouldn't drown, fill it up, set it 50 feet away from the hive, and they bearded it up and took everything within 6 hours.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun to watch that happen, and it is very depressing to watch one of your hives be treated like a feeder, and all the bees come and rob it, your hive. That's very depressing. So I'd be careful about open feeding, especially right now. You know, if you
I
think
like,
there's a
I like
nectar
feeding inside the hives. I got gallon feeders that fit in the sleeves.
Yeah.
And that works a lot better, but it still only lasts 3 days.
Yeah.
3 to 4 days, put a gallon in the hive, 3 or 4 days later, you go check on it, it's gone.
Yeah.
it all depends on your area. I mean,
Yeah.
I
How
got
much they're harvesting for the.
I got a yard in Crafton, as the crow flies, it's 4.5 miles, and it's a totally different nectar flow, it's a total different pollen flow than it is at my place. Same here with Decatur. I've got a yard here north of Decatur, I got a yard south of Decatur, I've got a couple in Chico. Every yard is different, it's that geographical area, so it's a judgment call every time you pull in the yard. What do you need to do at that yard? And so it's a planning session where you gotta be prepared to react and be able to come back and respond to the reaction of what you see at the place.
And you know, being at home, that's the same thing. You have to make a judgment call on what you need to respond to. So we'll go ahead and go ahead with this hot honeybees presentation. Typically I scoff at high temperatures with bees. People will always ask, you know, should we make a special shade for our bees? And typically I say, no, don't worry about it. They'll be fine. And this year it has just been extremely hot. It has been so bad, and that I've noticed the bees really outside of the hive a lot. And I've gone into a nucleus hive a couple of weeks ago and seen a lot of dead bees inside of the hive and a lot of live bees on the outside of the hive. And so my first thought was varroa mites. And then I went on, I was doing some other things. I had to get ready for some other queens that I had coming in. My daughter and I made up a bunch of nucleus hives, and then the next morning, it was probably about 1 o'clock actually before we got out there and really got to these little nucleus hives. And one nucleus hive had, I had accidentally left a plug into the entrance where they couldn't get in or out. The entire nucleus was dead. It was just overheated. So bees overheat real easy. So, and when they overheat, they become almost like saturated with sweat, and you would think that they were covered in syrup. So when you know that something has happened. There's no recovery. There's no coming back from that. So the entire nucleus was dead, and so we had made up 100 nucleuses, and we ran around putting tops on top of regular hive tops on top of nucleus hives everywhere, and, to try to block the sun off of them. The nucleuses that did the best were in like 6-foot ragweed that they were shaded by the ragweed. So, Joe Lewis, he has come and talked in the past, and he's always said that nucleus hives are very volatile and sensitive to the heat because they can't control the heat fluctuations. So last year I'd done a study on heat. James had mentioned something about at 98 degrees egg laying stops in the hive, and that's talking about the ambient temperatures around the hive. So I had insulated a hive and found that the hives that were not insulated the egg laying had stopped. It was like 103 degrees for several days. And but the one that I insulated, that queen continued laying. So we can affect what's going on inside that hive. We can help them to continue laying. We can help them not be overdone in the heat. So that was, my premise for doing this presentation. Now, we don't like to have our bees in the shade because there's a small hive beetle that will pupate in the ground, and it lays the eggs in the hive. It pupates in the ground, so the larvae will leave the hive and go into the ground. And so those hive beetles do not like full sun because they'll burn up by the time they get into the ground and to pupate and to come back as flying hive beetles. So we want to keep the bees in sun, but with this occurrence going on where we've got multiple days of high temperatures, it's not going to hurt to try to help your bees stay a little cool. And certainly, and I did have another member, call me and say that they had lost 3 of their hives. Now, they had bees in long Langstroth, and the long Langstroth, are y'all familiar with that?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm able.
So it's basically, a long hive that is up off the ground where the purpose is to not hurt your back so much leaning over this hive. But with the long Langstroth, instead of having an up and down chimney effect, you have a long effect going on. So when there's excessive cold, then if that hive is small, then you've got all this space that is not being warmed. So then the hive will be chilled. If you have excessive heat, then you don't have good ventilation for this long Langstroth. So I've never been a fan of the long Langstroth.
They
But
also don't like taking a lot of honey. You'll have tops of every one of your frames will have honey in it, but there's no soup or anything you can put in it, and there's no expansion.
right.
No matter how many frames you put in it, they'll grow, but they'll always be laying eggs at the bottom and honey on the top of each frame.
Yeah, you can't super them. I know
You can't
that.
super 'em.
Yeah. So, but that's just one of the things that you find out in your beekeeping. So later, as you progress, then you can realize what you might need to be able to do with that long Langstroth. I don't know what to do with it because I've had one, but it just didn't seem to do very well. So I moved on to other things. So with the ventilation above 95 degrees, so when temperatures are above 95 degrees, I suggest some type of ventilation. So you can either put anything less than 1/4 of an inch, because bee space is 3/8 of an inch. You don't want anything to just be going in and out where you're ventilating, but that will help the airflow. So to get some of that heat out, If you can put penny, nickel, I've heard people use toothpicks, whatever, prank stir stick, anything that is less than 1/4 of an inch, you know, to keep that, because you're basically making another entrance or exit when you do that. So if you're having robbing problems, this might not be a good choice. A robbing screen and maybe a screen top. So we have something called hardware cloth. So the screen board you can make with jute, which is what is that gunny sack material? What's that called?
Burlap.
Burlap. Yeah, burlap. Hemp. Yeah. So hemp, burlap, whatever. But any kind of fiber and we have a hardware cloth. Hardware cloth is hard for me to find anymore. Are you using hardware cloth, James?
Some.
Yeah. So it's 1/8 of an inch squares on this hardware cloth. So the last place I found it was Springtown Do It Center. They actually had to order me a roll of it, and I've long since used that roll. But I made screened boards. So basically, when I say a screen board, I take 4 boards the size of the hive and put a screen on top of it, and then staple it however you're going to adhere it, you know, and then put that on top of the hive, and that allows airflow to breathe. But you put that under your top, you know, so you're still putting some type of shim in there to have airflow. But the screen helps to keep bees from other bees, robber bees, from coming in and robbing your hive. So, and in the summer, you know, that's really prevalent. So you have to be careful about that.
Hey Donnie?
Yes, ma'am.
On the penny nickel or are you just putting like one end so that it just jars like a corner? Or are you putting a bunch of them around so it lifts it up?
So I put it on the front 2 corners. So if you have a telescoping top, you take your telescoping top off and put it on top of your inner cover, 2 pennies in the corners, and then put it back down. You can put all 4 corners if you want, but just to give a little space. Now that's at around 95 degrees. Now remember, the brood nest is 94.9, so it's not a big deal for it to be 95 in the hive, but constant beating down sun give you a little airflow might be helpful. When the temperature is definitely higher, yes, you'd want to do something else. So consecutive days of high heat over 100 degrees, for me, requires some type of maintenance. These are mating nukes right here. We've added some insulation board. It's foam covered with 2 pieces of metal. The top of that metal is so hot you wouldn't want to touch it. Burn your hands. You try to touch it without gloves. I used the other day. So one day I was moving bees and had parked them where I thought they would be in the shade. The sun hit them, and I went to go and get plywood boards, whatever I could do to put over the tops of those hives to cover them. Because the bees, once they get heated up, when they leave that box, if they leave it for too long, then all your brood is going to be unattended and will die. And it can be overheated because the bees are in there trying to fan and circulate air to cool it off. So these are very small hives that needed some help. And now, to my surprise, these have been covered in foam for a while. The queens that were in there were laying, but the mating nukes that were not successful, it was a large percentage of unsuccessful mating nukes because with the high temperatures, the bees obviously aren't getting out and going out and getting bread or making it back. Maybe there's dragonflies getting the queens on the way back. So you got to take all that into account. Anything that you can, any insulation material. So when Langstroth invented the beehive, it was 2 inches thick. Can you imagine carrying that thing around? So now, you know, we have it 3/4 of an inch thick. So we've, over 100 years, we've lost 1.25 inches of insulation, of wood type insulation. If you look at bees and trees, if they're bearding, if they're hanging out on the outside of the tree, it must be they're either extremely congested in that hive, or they would be very hot. That's not very typical, seeing how tree trunks are very thick. So that's how they survive better in these trunks than these 3/4 of an inch lifestyle hives that we have.
What do you mean by insulation?
So wood is an insulator.
Right.
So there's certain R values to every insulation. You can go buy foam board insulation that'll tell you the R value.
Like the little silver stuff that you talked about?
That is an insulator, but typically you'll want something thicker for insulating heat. Now that's under his top, so that gives extra insulation too. So for those who use telescoping tops and you have inner covers, that's a bit of insulation there too. So that's always good. So the some of the hives that I was talking about, I took this picture that I covered in wood. I took this picture right after I covered those guys in wood. But these bees are in the tree line, so they have the eastern sun, and behind them is west, so they have protection from that western sun. Those bees are very active. What they're going to get the most of is water. They are so this is outside of my back door, and I can see bees going back and forth, and they're going back and forth to our stock tank. And they're you go over to the stock tank, and the horses are like, hey man, you can't get a drink of water. Because the bees are all coming there. So when they're doing water runs, they're just going back and forth, and you can't believe that they're flying in this heat. Well, they're very resilient.
So you're saying that the afternoon shade is not bad?
I'm saying it's not bad, yeah.
Okay.
In the past, people have always advocated afternoon shade. I've been kind of like, whatever. But yeah, I think it's probably a pretty good idea, us living here in Texas, and if you can have a little bit of afternoon shade, that'd be good. If you can't, just a simple top, a wooden top, a migratory top that I use, on top of the beehives is better than nothing. I mean, it's blocking some of the heat off of it. The symptoms of high internal hive temperatures are fanning. These bees here, if they've got their bottom turned to us and they're pointing toward the hive with their head, then they're fanning and they're circulating air in. Now this is a very small mating nuke. Of course, on a larger hive, you would have more bees out there trying to circulate more air. The one bee that's going in is just come from a water run, and so it's bringing water, because they use the water to cool the larvae and to cool the hive. So with the fanning, it's like air conditioning. So we always worry about them. I know a lot of us always worry about the bees overheating, and they can overheat. So this, I can't see that picture very well, but that whole front of that hive is bees. So it's like 2 or 3 inches thick. This is a self-induced bearding incident because we're trying to treat for varroa mites. So at 109 degrees internal temperature, the varroa mites are killed under the cappings. So this machine here that you see out in front of the hive is a Mighty Mite thermal treatment unit. The electronics for it has become unobtainable, and they cannot manufacture anymore in America. We have one, the group has one. If you're a member, you can use it. It is a 2.5 hour process. So 2.5 hours at 109 degrees, all your bees will come out of that hive. So imagine that if you're seeing all your bees at home come out of their hive right now, they're freaking hot. And so you want to give them a little shade, because they're not going to be able to withstand 109 degrees for consecutive days. The hive is eventually going to phase out and die. It may have killed the broil mites 1 or 2 days, but the rest of it, it's just too much. Now, the people who do use the Mighty Mite thermal board, they use it when they do a treatment, I think they use it every 3 weeks. I have one of my own. I've never done these successive treatments afterwards. I do one treatment, it's good, we're gone, you know. But the diehard MNT users will treat like 3 times with this thing over a span of 3 or 4 weeks, but it's not for me. The bees, when you put this unit in, you are trying to make the hive rise to 109 degrees. So the bees can make it time out. They can fight so hard with their fanning and make it where that machine will not attain the 109 degrees. If it does, if they are successful for 45 minutes, it will time out. And so you'll have to start the process all over again until you achieve that 2.5 hour limit. But so that tells you that they're totally capable of handling most of this heat. But this heat that we've had, I'm not used to having this in June. This is something we experience in July. Usually I'd be going, hey, my Vitex is blooming in July. It's cool. But my Vitex bloomed in June. And unless I go cut everything off of it, it's not going to bloom again. But not in July anyway. But so things are different this year. And if you have hives that are out in direct sun that I've always told you to do, I'd suggest that you put something over them, even if it's just a board, to give them some kind of shade. Where the sun hits, anywhere the sun hits, if the sun is hitting on the front, if it's hitting on the side, if you have to lean a board against it, this is all temporary. It's just like when in the wintertime, when it gets superlatively cold and you want to run out there and insulate your hive, and then the next day it's 50 degrees. And so you got to run out there and take it all off. With the summer, at least you can leave the board in place for a while and it's not going to hurt anything, what I have seen is what James was talking about, the queen stopping laying. And he said that he saw several frames of brood in the hive. I've seen the same thing. It's been kind of weird that the queens would continue to lay. But you got to remember, that is the temperature in the beekeeper's handbook. It says 98 degrees. And we like things black and white. We like them. That's the temperature is this. And it's not that way, because we can't always, unless you have a thermometer inside the hive telling you what the temperature is inside the hive, you really don't know. So you just gotta go with what the bees are telling you about the fanning, about the bearding. If you see a few bees outside, probably not a big deal. If you see a lot of bees outside and it's real hot outside, it might be a big deal. So you guys have any questions about that? No? Okay. Questions about anything else? We'll do our question and answer thing. I have no idea what time it is. What time is it?
6:45.
All right, we got plenty of time. Oh, I did miss one slide. When I do get in an emergency situation, I use the water sprinkler. If I've got robbing taking place, I'll put a water sprinkler on that hive. If I have a hose that'll reach. If it's way too hot and I need to cool that hive down quickly, then I'll put a water sprinkler on. It's not going to hurt them. It's not a big deal. I mean, as long as it's not shooting right in the entrance,
We're for Mr.
Yeah.
So it's all on this.
Right. Yeah. But we've got you can overdo things. So if you shoot a lot of water in there, then that would not be good either. Yeah.
So you can set up a mister at front of it, so that they could that would cool it down.
I would just do the sprinkler. The oscillating type, you know, the back and forth type
Where it
sprinkler.
hits it and then goes
Yeah.
off, and then hits it and goes off?
Yeah, I've had bees loaded on a trailer, gonna move them somewhere, got worried about how hot they're gonna get, and put the sprinkler on 30 minutes, and then stop, you know, go on and off with it. And not only cool them, but it'll also give them water to take into the hive.
Could also water all the weeds and plants around it so you don't have dry weeds that catch on fire if you drop your smoker.
Sure.
So when you spray them, you just like spray the roof, is that what you're saying?
Like you're spraying the roof of your house.
Okay.
You ever done that?
No.
Used to be a thing.
Used to be a thing.
You'd spray your asphalt shingles, you know, cool your house down.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of like that with the house. Just don't shoot it right in the entrance. You know?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Or where they're bearded.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's kind of like watering plants. If they were bearding and you watered them, they might get hotter. All right. Anything else? We're gonna quit at 6:45.
I have one.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
We were in California for a week, beautiful weather in California. We came back here and it was 109 last week. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning, went out to just check on the bees because there'd been a hailstorm while we were gone, just to make sure everything was okay in the yard. And all of my hives had bees on the outside.
Yeah.
Is that normal for, it was 1 o'clock in the morning.
1 o'clock in the morning.
I always thought maybe bees go inside all night.
Well,
All
not
of
when
them
it's
were outside.
Yeah. Do you know what the temperature was at that time?
It was 101 degrees.
At 1 o'clock in the morning? Oh, that would be normal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, because if they're excuse me, if they're all inside the hive, the brood will overheat. If it's a situation where they have 2 7 frames of brood, however many frames of brood, all that brood would overheat and die. So it's like incubating chickens. You gotta have a certain number on the temperature scale. 94.9 is their number. So when it's above that, bees start to evacuate. Go outside, they start fanning.
they don't care if it's dark.
They don't care.
They-
No, you know, I've heard stories of bees going and getting nectar in moonlight, under full moon. You know, I'm like, yeah, let's get it.
This week it's much better.
Yeah.
They seem to go to bed.
Yeah, we're good. But yeah, it's got to be hot. When they're doing that, it's got to be hot, no matter what time of day.
So you're gonna be treating your bees this month now that hopefully you've pulled all that honey, are you gonna be treating them?
I only treat the nukes that we made, but no, me personally, no, I won't.
Paper bar?
Before on the nukes, yes, yeah. Now,
I have another weird one.
okay,
So if you can treat verolomite at 98 degrees consistently.
109.
Huh?
109.
Okay, 109. So
Yeah.
last week we had, I don't think it got any cooler than 98 degrees even overnight.
Yeah.
In some places here.
Right.
I mean, effectively during the day, it was like the heat index was like 118 one day.
Right.
But the
Was
bees
that
were cooling off the bees were cooling off the interior.
Yeah, okay.
And just imagine if they did have over 109 degrees for over 2.5 hours, there would be death. I mean, there's going to be some death involved, whether it be the walking around bees or the bees inside the cappings. So, but James Nielsen makes you make your nukes in August.
Yeah, I'm starting now. Yeah.
Okay, and then what is your method? Do you treat your
I
full
actually-
hives before that, or
I started treating last week.
last week with
Camouflage.
Humiphos? Is that paper bar or?
No, it's a home
Oh, okay. We don't have to tell us that.
home recipe.
Yeah. The mite buildup is now, isn't it?
Mhm.
So if you are a hobby beekeeper and you keep your hive in one location all the time, you might want to start looking at the mite buildup and testing for mites so that you would be able to know what the level of mites were, so you could test and treat for those mites that way. I have hives that are moving around Texas and pollinating and things like that. We're still making honey, so I don't want to treat, as much as I can. But if I find a situation that I see that the cappings are very dark, like Mississippi mud dark, and then I think that that's an indication to me that hive is not healthy, and it's usually from varroa mites, and I will pull it out of circulation, out of production, and treat it. Otherwise, it's going to be lost. So, if you
There's a lot of different chemicals from Data Ant Man Lake that you can apply. You gotta watch your temperatures really close, and especially in the summer, because like Apricot, you cannot exceed 105.
Aprilbar's not supposed to have a temperature limit.
Pardon?
Aprilbar's not supposed to have a temperature.
Apricot.
he said apricot, it's a different. So the question was,
White Away has a real temperature restriction.
So the man's question was, are we spraying to treat, or what are we doing to treat? So James is just explaining the different treatments that they have. Go ahead, James, I'm sorry.
So, I mean, you gotta figure out what'll work for you. I mean, there's Formic Pro, which is an acid that's temperature sensitive. It can't be over a certain temperature for a 7-day period. Apricot's the same way. Apribar you can use that year round, can't you?
Yeah.
So you just gotta look at it and figure out, and it's not cheap. It's not cheap, so you gotta do your thermal treatments if you wanna do thermal, or you do brood breaks. Part of the nuke preparation is I'm going to brood break. I'm building the nuke, it doesn't have a queen, it gets a natural brood break, which will help reduce the mites as well. And so I'm starting to do some of that. I've got an order of queens coming in here in about 14 days, and I'm trying to get prepped for the queens to come in to make the nuke.
So you're getting some nukes ready now?
I'm prepping my yard for them. I won't do the actual split probably until 3 days before the queens arrive. And they could make some of their own queens, if I split them earlier, but I want the genetics that's coming in. I don't need any more mean bees. I got plenty of mean bees.
What are you looking at me for? Yes, sir, I'm sorry.
Okay, so we've got some mediums on that are chocker full,
Oh, yeah.
and we're ready to start harvesting, but we've got a spinner, but it only takes big frames.
No.
Can it take the small frames?
Yeah.
Does it just lean up in there?
Most of your extractors will do large frames, but you can only do one side at a time. But it'll do the medium frame to the radial. So you just gotta get your manual out for that manual. And, just spin them up. I mean, crank away. Find somebody young to spin that wheel.
Does it,
This
that,
got it where you can hook a drill up to it.
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So does it,
Just remember to let go of the drill before you let go of the trigger.
do the frame set like this or like this?
They go down where like the top of the frame and the bottom of the frame.
Yeah. So, like James said, you might be able to set them straight, the mediums. and-
Okay.
And get both sides at one time. If you can't, it's called a tangential, something like that. And you'll have to flop the frames over. But you should be able to put the medium frames in. Does it have a little notch for the ear of the frame to go down in the corner?
I'll have to relook at that.
Yeah. There's usually a little notch there for that.
The club does have an extractor, but I don't know who's got it.
We don't say that no more, James, because we don't know where it is.
I think I know who's got it, but I don't know for sure.
I got a little 2-frame hand crank that you can borrow if you want to borrow it.
I've got a couple of 2-framers too, and one 4-framer that's hand cranked, and somebody needs to hand crank them.
Yeah.
I just got one, it was on sale, and it's a full 4-frame electric. And it will, I haven't tried it yet.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
A couple questions about moving bees.
I would use the pickup trailer. I wouldn't use an enclosed trailer, or pickup truck, I mean. You want them to have open air. If you're gonna be doing it in the heat of the day, you gotta put ice on them, ice bags, but.
My next question was, we were planning on doing it at like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Does it have to be 1? Is there any difference between like 10 p.m. and 1 a.m.?
Only the temperature difference. I mean, if you, like this lady that saw 101, at like midnight, then, or 1 o'clock, then that's not good. Then I would definitely be chunking some ice on them. But I've actually hauled bees with ice. And first time I ever did it, the lady told me to do it. I said, okay. But you know, at $250 a nuke, you don't want to lose them. Yeah, but like so if I get a chance, if it's like 80 to 85 degrees at 9 o'clock and it's dark, I go. And if you're moving, it makes a big difference if you're moving or you're sitting in traffic. Now, if I was out in East Texas and I was gonna haul bees through Dallas and it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm gonna hit it at 5 o'clock and I'm gonna sit there and them bees are gonna fry. So it's a big difference whether you're moving and what time of night it is, you know, what the temperature is.
Now, we've been talking about hot bees all the time. From what I've read, once I move the bees, I'm supposed to keep them in the hive for 3 days. Have a feeder in there. Is that still okay to do when it's as hot as it is right now?
Man, I wouldn't. I left that plug in that nucleus hive for, I made them up that afternoon, and it'd been less than maybe 12 hours, and they were dead. They were cooked. We were running around like mad people trying to get tops on them, you know, these bees, so to keep them cool. So I wouldn't keep them shut up for 3 days. Really, when you bring them home, it's going to be a big difference from where they were. They're going to come out. They're going to come out of the hive. They're going to fly backwards. They're going to go back and forth, and they're going to reorientate themselves, and that's where they live. So, you know, if they leave, who's to say they would have stayed in the first place, even after 3 days? After 3 days being shut up in this heat, they're probably dead.
That's what I wanted to ask. I didn't like the idea of combining them, so.
Yeah.
100 degrees outside.
When it's 40 degrees, it's fine. But this hot, they'll be like, man, it's too hot to fly anyway. Wait, all right. Give me some water. Anybody else? We good?
We're good.
All right.
See you next month.
All right. So if you guys have any suggestions on topics that you want to hear, you know, please shoot
Do we
them
have
to
a
us.
workshop coming up anytime soon?
We haven't planned one.
Okay, alright.
One
Oh, wait a minute, James got something.
One thing I'd like to mention, I've gone 2 years in a row. Mary and Mike went last year, but there's going to be an upcoming convention in January again in Sevierville, Tennessee. It's called the Hive Life Conference. There are speakers from all over the world that's at the conference. I find the conference very reasonable price. I think last year was $70 for 2 days. Our hotels run us about $100 a night. Yeah, it's a 16-hour drive over. But the vendors and the equipment and the savings and kind of stuff that you can gather at that convention is great. Plus, you'll have speakers like Bob Binney from Blue Ridge Honey there, very knowledgeable guy. Ian Stepper was there last year from Manitoba, Canada, and a lot of other good beekeepers, commercial and sidelight beekeepers, queen breeders. So if you're interested in it, they're going to be opening up ticket sales here in July. You kind of got to keep your eyes open for it. Last year there was 1,500 beekeepers, not counting vendors there. It was a great event, and we enjoyed it. So if you guys show up, we'll see you over there.
What's the name of it?
Hive Life?
Hive Life Conference in Sevierville, Tennessee. And it's always the first weekend in January. So if January 1st shows up on Saturday, it'll be the following Saturday. So anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you, James. Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet.